Hi, hello everyone. So, in today's video, I wanted to tell you more about the chapter entitled Clubs in my book Piglet. And I wanted to tell you, I wanted to start with a little bit of a story uh, surrounding the conflict over the fun. So, the conflict over the fun is a very interesting thing because lately I have been writing a lot about the air energy, and I have been writing a lot about um, working with your tongue and working with your words is that being related to witchcraft and some of the elements of the energies that witches work with. So the fan energy is a symbolism of the very first street club. So yeah, the conflict over fan started actually with the conflict over the open door by the restaurant that has the doors right next to our doors to our flat. And it started with the door, and there were three similar but yet modified situations that I have encountered. So one time, my parents argued with the owners of the bar, Mr. and Mrs. Kapusta, over the open door to the restaurant. And the point was, the fan was missing. There was no fan. No windmill, no the thing that is supposed to, provide that good air in the restaurant and is required, right? So that was the argument of my mother, who was always annoyed that the door was left opened. So the first time I encountered that situation was when I was at home and I could see them through the window because we live in the ground floor. And I just didn't react, didn't respond to it. And the second time it happened, I was coming back, I don't know, maybe from school, maybe from shopping, and I stood, for a short time in a circle, and I just looked at these people around me, and I decided that I had nothing to do with it because the open door to the restaurant didn't disturb me. And basically, it's just I had this thought occurring in my mind that I could help resolve the conflict and I could help them. And when looking at that lady, I have been thinking about her son, and that a few years before I have met her son in a different context. So I just had that thought occurring in mind, and I just entered the flat. And then, well, yeah, the third time we had, the argument over the opened door to the restaurant was when it was just my mom, my dad, and Mr. and Mrs. Kapusta. And Mr. Kapusta was very, rude. So he was so loud that this time I decided to, somehow help. And I didn't know how. And I decided very quickly. So I opened the window and I just leaned over the window and I started to record them. But I was using my phone and the camera just, it didn't work, But I was in my mind, like, I'm recording, like, I'm at least pretending to record. And so he should lower his voice. And I think, he didn't react immediately as he should. It took him a while before he lowered his voice. Yeah, so we had three situations, when I, could encounter Mr. and Mrs. Glovatsky family and Mr. and Miss Kapusta family. And, not long after that, I had a fling in a hotel in the main square. And then when I was leaving in the morning, not only it was a situation when I had a lot of shame in sex, so, but in the morning when I was leaving, today is going to be a very long story. So when I was leaving, then I saw Mrs. Kapusta sitting in a hotel Uyana, and I had a lot of thoughts like she's going to tell my mom, and there were cameras in the room or something like that. It was a hotel, and basically there was no one behind the bar, and there was no one sitting next to her, and she was just basically sitting like when I was crossing straight on, and I could face her. She wasn't like, with sitting with her profile to me or something. She could really face me. So there was a long corridor when we could just look at each other, and there was no glass of morning water, orange juice, or a cup of coffee. She was just sitting and looking at me. She wasn't even like, on her phone or on her computer or doing something in a notebook. None of it. And it was early in the morning. As far as I remember, it was 6 a.m. in the morning. Because I wanted to stay in bed, but I wasn't allowed to stay in bed. I was told that my friends who would wake up would laugh at me. So you can imagine. Yeah. And later on, I kept on seeing her sometimes when smoking a cigarette, and she's still a thought would occur in my mind that she would tell my mom. And I was about 27, 28 years old woman who already had sex in the past. So it just doesn't make any sense. And now looking back at it, I know that with the work of energy, with covert hypnosis, you can send somebody energy, you can send somebody thoughts. So therefore, that's my advice for you. You can always question your thoughts, and yeah. So, but today I was going to tell you a lot about the clubs. So, why am I going to tell you about the clubs? Because I was made into a party girl. I was made into a party girl and into a stripper in a lot of different ways. So I'll tell you a story regarding the clubs today in Tarnów. So one of the stories that I just heard is a story regarding the club called Under the Arcades. And the story goes like this, that, there was a bartender who, not about the owner, who somehow ended up behind the bars. I don't know what did he do, but he ended in prison. And, when he left, he wanted to get his bar back. But his wife managed to fall in love with somebody else and start a relationship with that somebody else. And when her husband, who was behind the bars, showed up and didn't want to go away, somebody just put his car on arson. They arsoned his car. And that will be pretty much it as a story. Just one time when I entered the place, and there was as if nobody around, just them sitting in the middle, like one man and a lot of blonde girls. And then I had an impression, oh, maybe this is the story that my sister told me about. But not in the moment, but with the flashbacks and with retrospection, I thought, maybe that could be it. That could be the boss. But it's a story. And in great stairs, in large stairs, in Tarnów, so in a place that leads you straight from the main square, there was a place where, Hubert Urbański, who was my colleague from a high school, he introduced me there, and therefore I got a job as, a person who sells hamburgers. And it was a club that would consist, with when you enter, you can buy a hamburger, or you can go take the stairs down and you can go to the club, right? So it's it's a very long story of my very first job where I could sell something. And I was accused, not even accused, but from manager Teal, from the cash desk, there was 400 zlotys missing, and I was on the shift, and I didn't know when it was gone. And at the end of the shift, I was just scared shitless, because that was basically, still a teenager then. And, I was sorry, and I told the boss that I would just somehow pay it back, because, it got lost when I had my shift. And he told me that, when I was saying that I was sorry, he would go over it, like how much was missing. And I was like, around this and this, but still, around 400. And he's like, yeah, so you didn't even know when it was gone. You should know when it was gone. And he was the one who took the money. And after, having to work at McDonald's many years later, when I really again sold hamburgers, or after working in Marken Express, where I sold tickets for the boats, in both of these places, whenever anybody had to do anything with your till desk, they would tell you first, and they would tell you how much money they would take out, and they would do it intentionally in front of you, and you were always informed no one is allowed to touch your till desk when you are on your shift. They have to tell you. If they want to exchange the money, they have to ask you. And that was pretty much soon the end of my work. Nobody told me, like, what's the reason and so on. Oh yeah, somebody mentioned that, yeah, it wasn't supposedly cleaned. Yeah. And what I wanted to tell you here is that during 3 or 4 working days in that place, with no agreement and not knowing even what were the names of my bosses, I managed to almost have sex with one of them. So I was sitting on the stairs, not on the stairs, on the chair. And, when I fell off the chair, the man who supposedly was my boss just was running downstairs to the club, and he was, happy. And I just, till today, I couldn't fathom and understand why was he laughing, why was he happy, and why didn't he try to, get me up from the floor, help me get up, because we were about to have sex, right? And during 3 or 4 working days, he would just buy hamburgers for his wife, and he would come along with his wife after what happened. And I felt awkward, of course, but I always had this thought in my mind that, well, he was much older than I was, and he never told me he had a family. And then he just like that brought his family to buy hamburgers. Like, in the period of 3 days, if you want to hide a romance that did not happen, you can do it, right? Just using logical thinking. But the thing is, this man is similar to my cousin. This man is similar to my flatmate I lived with, Magda and Isa. So, blonde hair, blue eyes. Yeah, and similar to my height. He could be of my height. And then the second boss was also similar to, a man who would give a practical course in Gracia Artist in Academy of Fine Arts in Krakow, or to a man who worked in Holland, but I worked with him like maybe once. Yeah. Yeah, and then so that was one of the bars, and it was soon closed. And then another bar was a bar called Pretext, and this is where I met a man from the conflict about open door, and yeah, and we just couldn't have sex, and because of dysfunction he had. And I remember during that time, I didn't do it yet. And there was a song that, I met him in Pretext, and they just asked me if I wanted to go with them to their flat. I remember the flat wasn't far away from Pretext. I remember the flat was very basic, like very clean, very basic. Like, there would be just a bed and maybe a table. And what I remember is that, the song of Rihanna, like "Rude Boy, Is You Big Enough?" That song was going in my head, and I even sang it. So yeah. But what I wanted to tell you is that this man was similar to my brother-in-law. So that's really, I mean, it's no longer surprising for me, not really, but so what I wanted to tell you here is that, I met him later on when I worked in this great club by great stairs, by large stairs. And I met him just, when sitting outside under the umbrella. I mean, in the garden, in Polish we call it a garden, patio. And I remember I took a photo of him, but the photo, so to say, walked out of the house. That means I can't find it. Yeah. So that bar in the Great Stairs and in Pretext, both of them were closed. And I remember I had a time of going to Pretext quite so often. It doesn't mean that always it was empty, but it means it very often was closed. The downstairs area where you had the dance floor was very often closed, and finally they closed the entire bar. And then there was the bar that I associate and link with my siblings. So that would be the bar called Carpe Diem, and we used to like going there. Um, and the bar was closed. But first, let me tell you about the bartender. So the bartender looked very much gypsy, darker skin, darker eyes, and longer hair, a little bit curly hair. And he would wear glasses. And what I wanted to tell you is that I had the impression that my sister liked him and I liked him. So after many years, he told me that he was into her. And I think she was into him too, but both of them at that time had partners. So, what else do I want to tell you is that he had a girlfriend, Monica, and Monica worked in Gemini. And in Gemini, she was a manager of a fast food restaurant. Don't remember which one, but that was the time when I started to date my boyfriend Przemek, who, when he met me and he met my sister, then he did the same thing. Like, he was first into her, and then he all of a sudden, wow, noticed me. So the only time when I ate something with Przemek, when we ate something out, was when we went to use coupons. so we went to Monica's KFC. I think it could be KFC, fast food restaurant in Gemini, in a department store in Tarnów, and we used those coupons. And I don't mind using coupons, of course. I would use coupons too. But the thing is, I don't have a memory of having any other meal with Przemek out, or I actually remember that he gave me a gift, and the only thing I liked about the gift was the box. And then he asked me if he could take the box back and if I needed the box. So I said yes, I needed the box. And I remember that one time we were going to the party and everybody was going to the shop to buy their own beer. So I bought my own beer and he didn't buy his own beer because he didn't want to drink beer. And then he drank beer and then he paid attention to other girls. So, yeah, therefore I think, coupons within the entire context of that boyfriend, well, that sounds really, really cheap. And I remember when we broke up, he took me to a bar in Wexlarska, and that was called Puszek, and he introduced me to a girl, Sylvia, and supposedly she studied German because, I studied English philology, so she studied German, or maybe it was just so similar. And what he told me was that she saw ghosts and she was like demented or something, and he asked me for the contact to my sister, and I just wasn't over it. I didn't like this man and I didn't think he was a good boyfriend, but probably I wasn't over back then, the contact to my sisters who was similar to me. And what I want to tell you is that Sylvia actually was similar also to the men I met in Pretext, and we had a fling at their place, although we did not because he had a dysfunction turnout, but I just didn't know it was not sex in the moment because I was a virgin. So yeah. So that man has a specific, his friend, Krzysiek's friend has got specific eyes, specific stare. Like, can really stare at you. And Sylvia does the same thing. She's got really big blue eyes, but the way she stares at you. And many years later, when I saw her, for a signed day with my father, we went to buy some candles, and then I could see her, and she could just stand and stare. Okay. Okay. And then another club that was very, very significant in my life was Kokomo. And here, I told you in some other videos about the curtain that we lived in a small flat with no bathrooms. So I used to wash behind the red curtain, a dark red curtain. And for about 12 years, I would get undressed and get dressed behind that curtain, right? And then many years later, I worked as a stripper, and I still got undressed, but just, for a much shorter period of time behind the red curtain, right? And as we lived in a small flat, then we had a second floor built in, and it's called mesamai. In my language, it's antresora. And because you have this second floor built in within the flat, then you have this strobe, this pillar that keeps the entire thing. And it was modeled for me that I could just jump around it and go down on it. And I used to do that, and I still like doing that. And then many years later, when being a stripper, I would go down on the dance pole, right, on the pole. And my mother used to say Kokonamunyu, and I worked in a strip club that's called Kokomo. Yeah. So when I worked in a strip club, I would hear, for example, from a friend about whom I used to think she was ugly. I never told a woman she was ugly, but she would approach me and she would tell me that a client told her that she had a nice pussy. So that got me thinking. And, today I just think it's just a stupid thing. I mean, I don't care. If he told you, keep it to yourself, right? But when somebody approaches you with something paradoxical, something unusual, then, they install the idea in your mind, and then your mind starts working, right? At least my did. And then by some clients, I was told that I should wear fuller pants. And I started to feel more insecure because, I had a scar, not a scar, but a birthmark on my butt, and I felt insecure, and I basically felt always insecure over there with nudity. So those remarks weren't really good for me. And then, as I liked wearing longer dresses, then when I lived in the convents in the monastery, then the washing machine ate up my dress that I used in that strip club. And basically, all of a sudden, we were told that we shouldn't wear dresses. We should wear two-piece underwear, right? Okay. And when it comes to my appearance, basically, I was told just when being employed that, I was implied that I wasn't good enough because the lady who employed me, she left the office and she brought another woman, and they both looked at me, they were trying to estimate if I was just, looking good enough to get this job. So I was really, in that moment, I looked at them thinking, ladies, you don't look better than I did. That's one thing. And the other thing is that now that I have watched the film Burlesque, And now that I know that a lot of identity of a stripper and the stories of infecting somebody in sex are based on Christina Aguilera's life and Christina Aguilera's the film in which she plays a main part, that is Alice Rose Ali. Um, she's the woman who goes to burlesque club and she fights to get that job. Okay. So I think that was just a scene in which I was supposed to fight for the job. But I didn't fight for the job because I was really like wondering, like I was asked, do you want the job? And I'm thinking like, yeah, okay. And what I wanted to stress over here is that the lady who employed me there was similar to the lady from the argument over the open door from Głowacki family. And that's the lady, both of them exhibit a lot of Dutch features. They both speak fluent Polish. It looks like they're Polish. But, I spent some time in Holland, and for me, they look like Dutch girls too. Okay, so basically, when working in a strip club, I worked with Gabriela, Magdalena, with Olivia, and I think that Olivia had a very hypnotizing way of dancing that she would just do it so slowly. And I also remember that one time I was just putting some body lotion on my body, and I got yelled at, and I was just asked if I wanted to kill everybody else around me, or if I wanted make everybody else like paralyzed. But I was told that the pole becomes slippery if we use the body lotion for the night. But nothing happened. But we have already worked like for 2 weeks, so I asked my friend, colleague from work, if she knew, because if there is something like that in such a place where you work with beauty, where you work with the way you look, then you definitely do care about the softness of your skin. And all of a sudden you learn that that was dangerous, right? And so I would just repeat such a thing over and over, I would think. um, and then within the structure, I think you might be curious how it all looked like. Like, we weren't paid for the working hours. We were just paid for the amount of drinks that were bought to us. So those drinks were very expensive. But, today I know that I'll be looking at a lot of recipes, and I'm actually the person who doesn't know how to cook much, doesn't know how to. Yeah, that doesn't know how to make those drinks yet, although I started to learn with Mr. Rysiek and with Steve online too. So it's still that there's a lot to learn about alcohol. So, what I wanted to tell you here is that I basically always got just two main drinks, and that was Sex on the Beach, I'm sorry, and Pina Colada. So yeah, only two. And today I think it's suspicious because there are a few pages of drinks over there, right? And I remembered that after the night shift, where actually the clients could stay as long as they wished, we had the meetings, and the meetings could long as your manager wished. And I think this was unfair because a lot of the issues that were going on were addressed to, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. They could be addressed individually because some of them, took longer time if we focused on one person only doing something wrong, right? So I remember I always called those meetings like Shabbat's meetings, like the witches meetings, because there are only women sitting there, and those women could be sometimes cruel, and yeah, like telling somebody like to a friend Iga that she sat way too long with a client by the table, and what are other girls going to do if she did that for a drink? So they also mentioned the line to like crossing the line and so on. But what I also remember is that when I stopped working there, I I received. Maybe I should tell you about that training. So to start the job, first we were trained for 2 weeks, and we were trained by a woman who told us that we could call her mommy. So I remember we would go to ice breaking parties, and later on we were asked if we haven't seen her wallet because she lost her wallet, or she would yell at girls that they acted as lesbians because they kissed, and that was an ice breaking party, so they weren't at work. Or when I stopped working there, she would call me and ask if I could borrow her money, or she would invite me for a private party, like closed party, something with getting undressed for sure, and I agreed, and then I was like, oh my god, my mother would read every message in the phone, and then I would be, and I always had a feeling she knew. So I was just lucky that for this time I just resigned from the event. Um, and she did with us, choreography, a common dance that she called Kinder Bueno. And maybe the animal is not that important. What I wanted to tell you is that I got back to that place because I worked there like for 2-3 months, and then I decided that I wanted to come back as a better version of a person, as a waitress, not a stripper anymore. Um, basically, I started to work, and I was told by a waitress, Carolina, that there was a client that has got some money, so go and get undressed and as a waitress, and you will get some extra money. And I didn't stay even longer in that the work, but yeah, I got undressed. So the transition from a stripper to from a waitress to a stripper, it didn't take long. And Carolina became a manager over there. And then many years later, I have seen the same woman when I worked in McDonald's. She was doing the inspection, where supposedly I was the one who, did everything wrong because there was something weird with the meat. Um, so, you know, obviously, in the moment when looking at that woman dressed in stripes, I just didn't grasp it. That this was Carolina. But Carolina was also very mean to me when I was working in Kokomo as a stripper or was as a waitress. Like, with the terminal, nothing worked, and I just didn't feel confident. Although, I wanted to work as a waitress. And I also remember one time behind the curtain, I see a woman, because when you are a waitress in a strip club, then you should sometimes have a look behind the curtains. So I think I saw somebody very similar to a famous actress. I don't know if she's famous actually, but to Katarzyna Zielińska. Um, and that for sure was not Katarzyna Zielińska in a strip club, no, but the girl had a very similar face to her, and a very similar haircut. Oh, I'd say haircut. But the body type was different. It was more soft. And what she was doing behind the curtains, she was like just imitating, pretending, if it's just to have sexual course with the orchestraman behind the curtains. I mean, the man who I saw behind the curtains was similar to the man I saw many years ago at the wedding of my aunt. So he was very similar. Okay. Still we have Hard Rock Cafe. Okay, almost. Yeah, almost done. There was still Hard Rock cafe, and this is a place I have visited, like, just to go and see inside. And I saw those T-shirts, and I think I saw like two floors. And in the previous videos, I talked to you about how this style originated, Hard Rock Cafe. But the story starts with, going to Marek, going with my family for New Year's Eve party. And, I remember I was 13 years old. I remember I for sure had Heineken beer because he liked Heineken beer. And I remember that my family was deciding and wondering if I should sleep with my sister's best friend's brother, Camille. And and I remember, that I actually didn't want it. And sure thing, there was for sure some curiosity, but I think I didn't want it. And today I just know it for a fact that it was stupid and just ridiculous that they would just sit and wonder if I should or shouldn't, because that's your family having sex, and family behind the walls, that the family that's decided. If you wanted to try, you can try. And that was the argument used, was that if we were to do anything, we would find a way anyway. So I slept next to him and we kissed. He grabbed me for my boobs. And then there were stories, I always felt suspected, like we did more or something. Or then I heard from my own sister, oh, my husband was in the main square and he heard that Camille talks badly about you. You have to be careful. And I think today, and this remark is really immature. And obviously such type of remark is uttered to you just to cause mental turmoil, nothing else. But the thing is, something happened during that night, because I was picking my nose and the blood came out of my nose. So in the morning I was all the time reminded by the host, oh, I thought he did something to you because there was blood from the nose. I think he And he saw it was the blood from the nose because he, followed me to the bathroom. So whenever he said that, I felt really ashamed, because I felt like everybody could suspect that I was picking my nose, which I did. Not to mention that whenever I farted, then and I thought that Camille wouldn't smell it because we didn't move the duvet, then immediately with response to that thought, he would move the duvet. So well, it was very, very shameful. Next time I saw that host, that man, that Marek, I just went there with my best friend without my sister knowing. And, he told us about teaching us, he would teach us how to give a blowjob on a banana. He would talk a lot about black guys, about their sperm, about getting women pregnant, that African men can make you pregnant. You're twice as much more exposed to that, because their sperm stays in your body longer and is stronger. And he told me about Thomas Berger's book, Little Big Men, Little Big Men. And once we had those two beers, perhaps, we went with my best friend to sleep in the same bed. He jumped among us and he stood at his penis and he asked to have his penis touched. Yeah, and then in the morning he drove us home and he gave us 20 zloty each. So that was basically looked like a pay for the service, you could say. So yeah, that story is strongly connected with the fairy tale Arya, where you could see the exchange of the voice, the speech for the legs. And the legs are very symbolic because, when you see can dance, a very scandalous dance, they start to work with legs, leg up, right? And in a street club, you work with your legs because you stood out your butt and yeah. So, but I'm gonna give you a separate film on that. What I wanted to tell you here is that the man didn't tell me in advance, okay, King, I would pay you for touching my penis. he didn't tell me, and I didn't know, and I just got this pocket money, and I felt bad. Um, yeah. And then I wanted to tell you about Garage. Garage was the place that was opened in the place of Carpe Diem. So Carpe Diem was my favorite bar, and therefore I think it was closed. We used to like going there with my siblings, and it was closed. And then when it was many years later reopened, it was reopened by the son of my phonetics teacher, Mr. Nawrocki. And what happened was that we got, so to say, intimate too quickly. And then, sometime later, a long time later, I would see him in Przepraszam Club. And I remember that when I went to the toilet, again, I farted like never before in my entire life. So I was so ashamed. And I had an impression that when I farted like that, he was in the bathroom, because some previous time when the time when I met him, I would talk to I would talk to Kaka about sex in the bathroom, which never happened in my life. But yeah, those were the thoughts surrounding my mind at that time. So you have to just yeah, and and when I met him in Przepraszam, then, I was at the point in my life when I wanted to live in Krakow. So he told me he had a flat in Krakow. And, I even met his sister, Claudia. And then I lived with Claudia in Goldhamera Street. So that was fun because that happened, there was a period of about, 3, 4, 5 years from the moment I saw the woman, and then I lived with the woman because she never openly introduced herself, like saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm related to this man." And my phonetics teacher, Mr. Nawrocki, actually, I had strong impression he never liked me, and I never liked classes with him. So we had phonetics with him. We had even conversation with him where he talked a lot about Islamic Bible, where basically we would be sitting quietly, nobody would say anything because we knew nothing about it. Yeah, and then we had writing classes, and during writing classes, one time we had to do a storytelling. So I wrote a story about meeting a plastic surgeon, and that was a story about a date that didn't go well. And he told me that during one conversation class, he told us that he had a son who was a psychologist. So when I met a man who told me he was a psychologist, then I believed him. And I believed myself when I linked them based on their appearance. But Mr. Nawrocki denies today. So yeah, maybe, I don't know. I don't care about what he says. Yeah, I think that is it when it comes to clubs in Tarnów and the chain of strip clubs in Krakow, Kakamo. And if you want to learn more about the way the system is created, if you want to learn more about witchcraft, if you want to learn more about how I was discovering the use of covert hypnosis in my life, and if you want to learn more about creating identities, then Piglet is the book for you. So go ahead, click the link below and check it out. And thanks for watching, and talk to you soon. Bye bye.